Well, when I say that George is a person that needs no introduction, I'm almost completely accurate. I'm sure there's a few people in here that will benefit from some of the information that I have about George. He's been a professor of biology at this campus for many years, going back to the early 1970s, probably the late 60s, because he was gone from El Dorado High School when I arrived in 1973. He's a consulting geologist. He's, as you know, probably an expert in Mother Lode Mining History. I know firsthand that he's a master classroom instructor. He's got all the tools to be the greatest. He's in his consulting, you'd think it'd be over by now in terms of him wanting to get out of it, but he's got that youthful enthusiasm which he portrayed on his 80th birthday when he went skydiving. And I mentioned in the advertising for this, yeah, give him an applause for that. And I don't have to tell most people in here what I do.
Nothing. No?
Did I do something?
No.
Did my cast fall off?
No.
I don't have to tell most people that George has touched so many lives in so many places, in so many generations over his career, that that's what we're celebrating tonight. On a personal note, George and I go back as colleagues and friends 40-something years. I met George through a mutual friend named Curtis Bolton, and from there we just jumped on board education. Curtis is one of the best instructors I've ever met in my entire life, and George and I still talk about him every time we get together. But without any further ado, let's listen to what George has to say instead of me. Let's give him a round of applause. George,
Wow. That's kind of hard to follow up on. Just a couple comments about Mike is really organized the biological life sciences field trip course for years at this particular campus. My specialty was getting people out and licking dirty rocks and getting infected as a rock hound type of thing. But over the past several years, the district has pulled in their horns and they're stopping supporting the field program, the field class program. So as you see now, there's no more life science and there's no more geology being offered in the curriculum. So, we're trying to get it back in, but it's a long process in this particular case in here. And every time I walk into the administration office, they kind of say, oh God, here he comes again. But, my idea is that they've taken the community out of the community college by doing this. And these are classes that we need to have for the enrichment of the community. So, as an alternative to this, I formed what is called the Geological Sauntering Society. And I have my business cards up here. If you would like to join me on sauntering trips, I don't run to the top of the mountain anymore, but I saunter up there at that particular point. And so we just came back from Mona Lake, another trip to Mona Lake. In the April, we're going to go to Virginia City, the mines over there. So if you're interested in these kinds of things, I have a clipboard here, and please give me your name, your email, and your telephone number here, and we'll keep you abreast of that. I have some business cards up here. So this is blatant commercialism, I realize, but at this stage of my life, I don't care anymore. So if we could have the lights off, and I can see what I'm doing. I'm looking here and projecting up on the screen.
It's like Alfred Hitchcock in that light.
Yeah. Well, I'm still looking at the right side of grass growing. So no. Putting this together, I had a chance to go through about 6 filing cabinets full of slides and pictures and reminisce and this type of thing. And in the last month or so, I've had emails from students who are now practicing geologists, and they're out in the middle of the desert freezing their butt off in the snowstorm, this kind of a thing. But you know, and I see a couple of them that made it from the wilderness over here tonight. But I'm going to talk about what I've done and the things that I've enjoyed doing and sharing with people. And you know, I didn't start out. I graduated from Salinas High School, and I had a scholarship to go to UOP as a music major. And so I played in the Monterey County Symphony and played the French horn and was really involved. A friend of mine said, "You don't want to go there. You want to go play football at Hartnell College." So he talked me into going to Hartnell College. And the coach said, "Well, you got to have 12 units to stay eligible, take classes from these teachers, and stay away from these teachers." So fortunately, I had a geology class, and it kind of turned me on, and it leads to here. But as a kind of a sideline in here, we had a very successful season. We ended up going to the Junior Rose Bowl for the national championship, and last summer they indicted us, our whole team, into the Hall of Fame down in Salinas. Yeah. Okay, Hall of Fame. So, schooling, I went from Hartnell up to San Jose State, and I got my bachelor's, and San Jose State had 3 majors in geology, in zoology, and chemistry and physics. And then from there, I ended up going to the University of South Dakota in Vermilion and got my master's in Vermilion. The other graduate schools that I've been attending over the years, in this particular case in here, is that I've taken graduate studies at Sac State, University of Utah in Salt Lake City, Colorado School of Mines, advanced prospecting there. I went to the Mackey School of Mines. In this one particular case in here, the University of St. Thomas and St. Paul, Stanford. Enjoyed spending some time down there, Cal, and then University of California at Davis, and on the bottom here, University of Texas in Dallas. So I've had a really wonderful opportunity to study a whole variety of different approaches and areas there. So that's kind of my background. Some of you, I see some former high school students here too also, but I came to El Dorado High School in 1961, and at that particular point, I became one of the science department. So I taught chemistry, physics, biology, physical science, anatomy, physiology, and I coached football and skiing. So this is, and I see some of my ski team members here in this particular case in there. So 61 to 78, someone just ran around behind me? Oh, okay. 61 to 78, I was involved as a ski team coach. Someone snapped a picture of me running the gates at Echo Summit, but I was on the National Ski Patrol in the Tahoe Basin, a member of the Tahoe Sierra Ski Ranch, Heavenly Valley, and Mammoth for 25 years. And I finally gave up skiing because I got frostbitten in my hands and feet and stuff, and just didn't enjoy getting that cold, but I still love to get up in the snow. At the high school, I started out quickly getting people interested in geology. This is one of the geology club that I formed at the high school, and we took students down 900 feet deep in the El Dorado limestone mine down on Duroc Road, in that particular case in there. So that was one of our first trips, to the earliest picture I could find. My college teaching experience has been varied and broad background. I've taught classes at UC Davis, Cal State Sacramento, American River College, more affectionately known in our circle up here as UBR, the university behind Raley's, that particular case in there. Cosumnes River College, Folsom Lake College. I'm presently emeritus faculty at Folsom Lake. I've taught classes in chemistry, 2A, 2B, 1A, 1B, physical science, biology 16. I organized the community college EMT program and got it going, which is very successful in this area here. And I've taught the following geology classes: physical geology, the lab; historical geology in its lab; mineralogy, paleontology, California geology; geologic field studies, earthquakes, prospecting for gold, and mining history of the Mother Lode. And I'm still doing that now. I've got 2 classes next semester. My mining history of the Mother Lode has been my most enjoyable class, and I would encourage you. It's on Thursday night. It starts at 5:30 and goes until 8 o'clock, one night a week, and there's no quizzes, and there's a take-home final. So this is my gift to the community in this particular case like that, so you don't have to do that. I was a geologist during this time also for the Forest Service from 1966 to 76. and I was responsible for timber sale road locations, geologic hazard evaluation like landslides along Highway 50 between here and Lake Tahoe. That's a full-time job for 100 geologists right now. Worked on metallic, non-metallic mineral evaluation, mining claim validation. I was the U.S. Forest Service representative to the Tahoe Planning Committee. I worked with SMUD on the American River Hydro projects, on Ice House, Union Valley, and the power facilities. I loved the mountains. We got up in here, that's why I moved to Placerville, because of the skiing and the mountains and the hiking. Here's a picture that I took back in 1966 with my oldest son Greg when we hiked up to the top of Pyramid Peak one afternoon. So I still enjoy that picture. When I worked for the Forest Service, I got all over. They actually paid me to climb up in the high Sierras, and I actually had to back in the door to collect my paycheck at times. But I just had a wonderful time. I was in charge of locating the Pacific Crest Trail from Tahoe City all the way down to the McCollum Wilderness, and spent summers up there in the high country. So just had a wonderful time like that. During the project, they were constructing Loon Lake, and I thought, boy, that would be a neat place to take a class on a field trip. So there's a 4-mile tail race tunnel. It goes underground. Under the powerhouse is now 1,200 feet underneath Loon Lake. So I was doing some work with SMUD on that, and they said, come on, bring your class. So I loaded kids on a train, put Forest Service hats on them, didn't tell them that there'd be curtains of water that we'd going through in this particular case. And so about halfway down there I said, I want to stop at this one outcrop. And this one outcrop, there was a white quartz vein that was faulted and offset, and when it was offset there was some beautiful red garnets in it. And the motorman said, I know right where it is. And he said, we'll stop and you can tell people about it. So he stopped. I got out of the car, and it was an ankle deep water, and I took 2 steps, and all of a sudden I was in chin deep water. They set me up. They knew exactly where the sump was. This is the picture in the powerhouse, and you can see in this area, the main vault in this area here. Notice a student looking, and water was pouring out of all my pockets in my wetsuit in there from that particular episode. They talked about that for years. So that was really an interesting one in there. Now, in addition to teaching college classes on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I began working for the Forest Service on Tuesdays and Thursdays and summer vacations. So I had a really neat job. They gave me a permanent position, 180 days full-time, and then call when needed the rest of the year. So I taught at the college Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I went over to the Forest Service and worked for them Tuesday, Thursdays, and holidays. So I'm currently consulting. Oh, and then I started my consulting business in 1970, separate from that. My consulting business involved conducting studies in mineral evaluation, mining geology, land use planning for land development projects. Most of the major subdivisions in the county, my employees and myself have wandered over that particular land. Asbestos identification, hydro projects and that type of thing, and working for SMUD. Now, geology to me must be studied not just in books, but in the field. I take pride in being a Pied Piper, leading groups of people into the mountains and deserts to get their hands dirty, picking up pretty rocks. Notice I say pretty rocks. There's no such thing as an ugly rock. You know, what is this? And there might be a dirty one, but it's still a pretty one. And when they lick them to get the dirty, the dust off it there, they're going to be infected for life as a rock hound, and they're going to be a Pied Piper following us all around. Now, putting this presentation together, I had to go through drawers and slides of pictures to recall the past 50-plus years of nostalgic memories and recall old friends, and chronicle the dozens of former students who are now professional geologists. And there's a half a dozen of them in the room right here tonight. So I'm really thank you for coming, fellas. Now, the professional geologists are the hundreds of other students whose driving habits have changed. They used to wonder what's at the end of that dirt road. Now they go see it for themselves as we go through Nevada, and that's really kind of neat. Our first mineralogy summer field trip was to the Owens Valley in 1968, and we had Old Yeller, the school van, and we took that places that were just unbelievable. And Mike kind of chuckles. I got pulled over by the police
release because they couldn't believe how old the license plate was.
Yeah. This particular, and I had to sign a release almost in blood that I never take this vehicle off a paved road. So our first geology trip was down to Owens Valley in mineralogy. I had some friends that worked for the USGS down in San Francisco, and I thought, boy, that'd be a neat place to go. So I organized a field trip in the late 60s, and you can see in here, how can you tell that these are late 60s students in that particular case? But this is called geologic street walking. There's a variety of street walking that occurs in San Francisco. But when you have a class of 30 students standing there and everybody else walks by and they're looking at the skyscrapers, and these people have got their nose 6 inches away from the rock walls looking at, and you get more looks from people going by at that particular thing there. But we had a wonderful trip in that particular case. There's Rockland Granite from San Francisco. This kid right here, Tom Allensworth is his name, just emailed me today. He just retired as the chief operating officer for Sperry Associates and in geophysics, and he was involved working with Bob Ballard on discovering the Titanic. He worked on the Challenger explosion, the Lockerbie, things like this. That's his expertise in the geology and geophysics in those particular areas. But here's standing in front of the Maritime Museum and looking around. What a motley crew that is. We parked Ole Yeller in front of the old Charlie Singh Fats International Bar and Cafe, and that's a very unusual place. They had a pool table in the middle of the bar, and you'd rack up the balls and you'd break them, and they'd all run to one side of the table. It made a very interesting game. We had to make up our own rules. But we were going to a fluorite mine north of Austin in that particular area. And this is one of our first field trips over there, and we started to load up the van. And here comes a kid carrying a rifle in a case and had a .45 on his hip. Climbs in the school van, and I said, Steve, I said, this is a school vehicle, and we really, you can put your pistol in your sleeping bag and leave the rifle here. And come to find out, he'd just gotten out of a North Vietnamese prison camp and had been prisoner, and he said, no one's ever going to take my guns away from me before. So he went for a year, 2 or 3 years of classes, and everywhere we went, he had a weapon with him that to protect us. So I felt good when we got out in some of the wild places in Nevada that we had that kind of a support. One of the places I found out about collecting crystals and minerals and things like this was that I would take a trip down Highway 50, and I'd see an obscure little bar like at Frenchman's in the middle of Dixie Valley. And I'd walk into the bar and I'd order a beer and I'd sit there, and the bartender would come up, and invariably they'd have a half a dozen rocks sitting on the back of the bar by the mirror. And I'd say, God, that's some really neat garnets. Where'd you get those? And he'd say, oh, well, on the back of a book of matches, he'd write down a little map and stuff. I found more field trip locations from the bars and isolated places in Nevada than you could imagine. This is on Sand Mountain Pass. Ed Bishop, that owned the slate mine, told me about this place. We walked over the top of the ridge, and here's a 2-foot wide vein of quartz crystals sticking in like this that ran for almost 800 feet. We classes collected on that ledge for years. That was a gem place to go in that particular case. On Sand Mountain Pass, there are mines all over the place on top of the hill. And we're setting up, in this particular case in here, setting up a tent. You notice that there's not too much vegetation in Nevada. This is why geologists like it. Over here we got manzanita and all kinds of stuff covering the rocks up. Over there, you can see them everywhere you go. But we were setting the kitchen up, and then we were constructing a toilet in the background up in there. And interesting afternoon, the students got together and they decided they would have a Vestal Virgin contest, and that she was to be sacrificed into a 1,000-foot mine shaft under the full moon at that time. Fortunately, her husband appeared and stopped the ceremony. This is putting the finishing touch on our outdoor toilet. And we put, in the 1940s, the state had a program to cap abandoned mines with concrete slabs. And here's a concrete slab that was about 8 by 8, and they put a 2 by 3 foot, it looked like a water meter in that type of thing. And so we just built a fence around it, and for privacy in that particular case. Have you ever sat down on a 1,000-foot deep shaft to go to the bathroom? interesting because in the morning the air is cold and it goes down. So you don't have to worry about any odor. In the late afternoon, the hot air rises, and you know the old expression, blown dry? You don't even have to use toilet paper in that particular case there. So they even had signs, they put a sign up about who helped construct this thing. Dr. Bliss, one of the local physicians, went on this field trip with us, and I tried to find a slide, but we had a ribbon cutting ceremony with toilet paper and a machete and that type of thing, so we did some very interesting things on Sand Mountain. Late afternoon, we're close enough to the Sierras that even in a lab in the afternoon you can get up to the high country. This is a late afternoon lab. We went up to Cody Meadows, which is up near Carson Pass, up on the top there. And this is, some of you can recognize some of the students standing in the background in here. Daryl Capurro. Daryl went on to become a professional diamond cutter. Went to the diamond cutting school for 4 years in Gardnerville. Boy, he makes some neat stones. Ask my wife. There's Mike Vanderdusen in the back. He's now a senior engineering geologist. John Doherty in the lower left-hand corner is 30 years as a licensed archaeologist. And so, you know, just all kinds of people in here. Now, when the road got too rough for cars, we loaded up Old Yeller. And then we found in the maintenance yard a stake-side truck. And so that was really neat. We loaded those up with students. And, you know, we always were on the paved roads with the school vehicles. So you didn't have to worry about that. Steve directed us to the fluorite mine north of Austin, and this was a dirt road that just disappeared into the horizon. And we just got some absolutely gorgeous collections of minerals in this particular one in there. Camping in the fluorite mine site. No facilities, no motels, anything else. You see everybody just spread out on the ground. So it is really, and the wind blows, it's amazing. Eagleville, near there, we had a garnet, scar and tungsten mine. Huge place to collect minerals. This is one of the earlier large field group trips to Eagleville. It's south of Frenchman. This is a black and white photo that was taken by Mort Klotz. And in this photo we have the ex-mayor of Placerville. We have 4 or 5 attorneys. We have 4 or 5 MDs and this type of thing. So we had an eclectic group that would go out in the desert and tell lies for hours around the campsite. One of the things is that when you're out in the middle of the desert, potty stops become a problem. So, you know, we'd stop in the middle of this dirt road there, and we'd say, okay, women on the right-hand side of the road, men on the left-hand side. Nothing taller than 18 inches. So it depends upon how modesty affected as far as how far you wanted to walk in that particular case. So they didn't believe me. Here's another one. You have to walk a long way when nature calls in this particular area. Well, one of our favorite places to go is the upper end of the Smith Valley, which is between Topaz Lake and Yarrington. In the upper end, there's an old copper mine site called Ludwig. And we did joint field trips with the art and ceramics classes to Ludwig and collected minerals all over the place. This is the campsite. We built a big monument on the end of the peninsula out there. And then here, we had unusual activities at night. We had, you know, people warned us about the biker groups, the Hells Angel biker groups that would come in to these particular areas. So we made sure Dan Dare here was the one that he brought his potato cannon along. And this thing had a range of about 1,200 feet, depending upon how fresh the potatoes were in that particular case. So, you know, with either fire a single projectile or a bird shot of potato pieces in that particular case. But we actually could fire that thing 1,200 feet. Someone, I think one of our local dentists, went along on a trip and he says, I want to see if I can hit that thing. And he took a baseball bat and he went out there and we fired one by him and he came back and his eyes were about that big. He said, that thing came by me so fast I didn't even know it was there. So that was interesting. We set up a big open pit in the middle of the mine area there, and the art students built a Burning Man, and this huge structure for 35, 40 feet tall. In the bottom of this Burning Man thing with lumber that we brought in, they built a kiln, and there's the tower under construction. There's the students loading the kiln. The copper mine had 35 or 40 different really colorful minerals, and so we collect these different minerals and mix them with clay and make little doodads and pottery and stuff. And there's the kiln with the the pots and bowls and figurines in it. Then we burn this thing and fire it up, and then all of the wood would collapse and it'd sit there and burn all night. And then we open the kiln up in the next morning and they were all fired. So there's the occasionally the local sheriff would come from 30 miles away, wondering who was burning up that part of the state of Nevada. But we never caused any real major fires. There's my wife and I, just on one of our trips in the southern end of the valley, we woke up one morning, sunshine the day before, I woke up the next morning, and there's, guess what, and we're 8 miles from the nearest paved road, type of thing like that. Students were in old caves and tunnels and stuff, and said, gosh, it was dry and then here's a group standing there wondering. We'd had one big truck and made him go out first so he could beat the snow down, because no one had chains or anything like that. But we made it. In that particular case, we built this big sculpture, freeform sculpture out there, and we named him the Ludwig Looker. In that particular case, there's the class picture of the students around the Ludwig Looker on the top of the thing, and that's just, what a gorgeous place to go. If you've not been to Searles Lake down on the other side of Death Valley, this is one of the more unusual places to collect minerals. And they have an annual trip down there, the Searles Lake Gem and Mineral Club. They conduct a 3-day collecting trip. The first day you collect hanksite crystals from muddy lake deposits. They have a great big mine dump, and he takes this and scoops and piles solid black cakey mud in piles 10 feet high. And it's like the Oklahoma land rush. They say at 10 o'clock, go, and everybody runs out there and jumps on this muddy pile and digs these crystals out. And then they have big troughs and 55-gallon barrels, and you can wash all the stuff off. And you think, oh my God, I don't want to get involved in that. This is a mud bath of people just up to their elbows and armpits in mud. And there's Mary Jane looking over. You can see the buckets there. And these are the kinds of things, these solid things come off, and you start washing the mud off. And these are blobs of hanksite crystals that are in the black mud. And they're just gorgeous things. And you can see that there's different sizes of them. And then the end of that day, the Navy comes over from the bombing range at Searles Lake, and they come along and they drill 100-foot deep holes down, and then they take some kind of an explosive extra from the Navy, and they blow it up at the bottom of the hole. Then they stick a pipe down in there and blow water out. And the water comes out, and then they have a right angle thing, and they just turn it around, and they just have a 50-foot radius of about 3 or 4 feet high of just solid colemanite crystals. Just all over the place like that. And you see the people standing there with 5-gallon buckets ready to go leap in the pile. And there's the kind of colemanite crystals that they spray on top of the ground in that particular case. There's a variety of different sizes of these kinds of things. Then the last day is they head out into the salt flats. And at the end of the season, the water starts to evaporate and gets hot, and there's an algae that grows in the salt flats in there, a pink algae. And as the salt crystals grow, they incorporate the pink algae in it, and you end up with these beautiful pink salt crystals. And so there's close-ups of the pink halite crystals, sodium chloride with the algae in it. There's one of them sitting on the bed of a pickup, and these are big chunks of crystals. They're not little tiny things you put in a salt shaker. But you wade into the ponds, and this is like tide pool stuff, Mike. You wade in there waist deep, and you reach your hands underneath the ledges. And you know that there's not going to be an anemone or anything, or a moray eel under there. At least you hope not, because it's salt and the pH wrong. But you find, and you can feel these big crystals. Then you take a great big giant bar and you start breaking these things loose. And so you're standing in the water waist deep and looking for crystals in that particular area there. So you have to immerse yourself. There's a 200-pound beauty in that particular case in there. And there's one in the library up in here. If you go in the library, there's a display case. We've got a 200-pound crystal set up there in the library from these collections. But this thing goes on every year. If you're interested in this, boy, you can go down there and have a neat time. There's a 100-pound mass of halite. There's the bar, and there's the crystals in that particular case. Close to there is a really neat place, Cerro Gordo. And this is one of my favorite field trip places. When they discovered silver in Nevada, The big silver strike at Virginia City brought people in looking for silver. Well, silver occurs in what they call a Walker Lane. It's kind of a parallel lane that runs down the east side of the Sierras. And so the first big silver strike was in Virginia City. The next one down the lane was Bodie. Bodie had huge amounts of silver. Then you went down to Cerro Gordo, which is above Owens Lake, and then down at the bottom of the mountain was the Darwin area. And so this is at Cerro Gordo, and in the background in here you can see Owens Lake. Here's the town, the old mining town. They've since converted these old buildings. It's been purchased by a private individual, and he has opened up some bed and breakfasts. So you can go down there and stay in a bed and breakfast and have that kind of a view. You're looking down into Owens Lake. Mount Whitney is in the background across on the other side. They had a 7-mile tram carrying the silver down to the edge of Owens Lake. At that time it was a lake and there was water in it. They had a steamer that was about 80 feet long, and they loaded that steamer up with bars of silver and took it across the lake, and then they put it on freight wagons and towed it down into Los Angeles. This mine financed the development of Los Angeles in that particular area. So, and the same with Darwin down at the bottom of the hill. But it goes from 6,000 feet up to above 10,000 feet in just about 6 miles. So you got to make sure you got plenty of antifreeze in your radiator. It's really tough in getting the car up there. Yeah, we went down and we had a trip to Darwin and Talc City. They mined talc down in there. It was a great place to get talc for carving and stuff. We tried to get the truck started, but it wouldn't go. In the top right in here is one of the students who's now a full-time exploration geologist in central Nevada. He's been all over the South America and Canada and these particular areas. So Scott is started out there and happened to lick a rock at the wrong inopportune time, and now he's going to spend the rest of his life wandering around desert ghost towns. But we went to Darwin and we're going to tour the big mine. We got down there and the caretaker had left and there wasn't around, so we were going to wander around to the cemetery. And just the town of Darwin has 13 people in it. It's on the way to Death Valley, and we heard something going chink chink chink, and I turned a corner and here's a guy working on a piece of marble with a chisel and a saw doing a sculpture. And turned around and met him, and we spent half a day with him. His name is James Huneau. He is world famous. He has a studio down at San Simeon, down south of Carmel. He's done statues and ponds and stuff in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And he does bronze sculptures and things. He just opened his house up in that particular case to us, and just a beautiful work in that particular case. Another trip out of Bishop, you go up and head east, and you'll go up to the White Mountains, and up on the top of the White Mountains at 12,000 feet are where the bristlecone pines go. But also there's some really neat fossils called trilobites and archaeocyathids. The archaeocyatid, archaeo meaning ancient, and cyatid, cup. These are the first coral reef organisms before true corals developed, and they're 500 million years old. So we collected in this one area fossils, and they're now extinct. There's not a living example of those. So that was up there and there. Mike, you mentioned about Point Reyes. And we had been to Point Reyes many times, but would never get in. We'd never gone in from the south entrance. So people wanted to go in and backpack. So we organized this thing. This is the parking lot at the south entrance, and we got our backpacks on. It was a little foggy, and as we were leaving down there, you couldn't even see the water in that particular case. So we're starting up toward the campground, and as we started going, it started raining, and this is our first day in. And then we sat. This is where we camped, and you can't hardly light a camp stove when it's raining and you've got nothing to put over it except a tent in that particular case. And so we, ate a lot of meals cold and wet in that particular case. And people standing around that evening says, "You mean we got to put our pack frame, our sleeping bag, all our clothes into the tent, and then we've got to get in?" So in the middle of the night, it really started raining to the point where the tents were collapsing and stuff. So the next morning, we got out, and there's trying to light a camp stove at dinner in the steady rain. The next morning, we're hiking out in this torrential rain. It rained 3 inches between when we left the campground to the parking lot. And we got to the parking lot, and everybody was, "Oh my God." We ended up getting out after 2 days of rain, we jumped in the school vehicles and we went down to Berkeley to the fish grotto and had hot clam chowder and a big stiff drink of cocoa in our case. Now, the Mono Basin has been one of our favorite areas over the years. And I just put together, I have a whole sequence of slides on the Mono Basin. And I see some people that have spent the night camping at Mono Lake Basin, shaking his head in the back there. So this is a partial chronology of the areas. The start of these odysseys began when I was teaching a field geology class. A friend of mine, Bob Matthews, was in the geology department down there. And he called me one afternoon in August and he said, "Can you teach my field class?" He said, "I just got promoted into the environmental science department." I said, "Sure, I'd love to. When does class start?" He says, "Monday." And this was Friday. And so I went down and we had, I met the class in a classroom like this, and the class consisted of 12 days of field trips all around Northern California. No list of anything. So I took a piece of chalk and I said, "Okay, where do you want to go?" And we just started naming the places that they thought would be really exciting to go. One of them was Mono Lake. The others, we went to Carson Pass, we went over to Point Reyes. We did an odyssey all around the state. But the first field class was in '72, and they wanted to go to the islands. So the way you get to the islands is you either go by boat or raft or you know, you don't swim over there. The pH of the water is 9 in that particular case. So this is one of the groups that we camped in the park there and then grabbed the raft and started going. And we got over and paddled over to the edge of the the black island on the north end is called Nedget, and then on the south end is Pahoa, the white goose. In that country, when ominous cirrus clouds start to come in, that means the wind's going to start blowing. And you have not much long time to get to shelter in this area there. So the first American River College field trip we went over there was in '73. So we camped in the campground. I just put some names up there of students scattered around in here. Tom Burkhardt on the left there just emailed me this afternoon. He's the head exploration geologist for Argus Exploration in North and South America. And he emailed me from Reno and he says, "I hope you had a good talk tonight." And he said, "I'll be thinking about you." He said, "You know, the only people that are going to be geologists today are the guys like, who's the archaeologist that Raiders of the Lost Ark, that type of thing." He says those are the only people that go into the jungles today. But there's our first trip. There's Al DiVittorio and his wife sitting there, and you notice that the bottles up in front. We had a community kitchen there, and everybody wanted spaghetti. So we had to have a lot of spaghetti sauce in that particular case. And the spaghetti sauce came in gallon jugs in that particular case. Our first experience on the north end of the lake is bounded by 4 major faults. And rainwater in the high country comes from 12,000 feet, percolates down through those, hits the fault, and then freshwater surfaces around the edge of the lake. So around the edge of the lake where these tufa towers organize are these liquefied areas, or these, I call them quicksand, spontaneously liquefying. So spontaneous liquefaction means that they're buoyed up by water. When you shock it, it loses all the strength and it turns into quicksand. So I told students, I says, don't go in a single line, because the first person through there is going to shock it, the second person is going to sink. So no one believed me, but you see them, they're up to their knees, and the kid in the front there, he's saying, "Who brought the rope? Quick, help!" In that particular case. So this is, education in the field. Right close to us, 100-foot diameter circle caved in, and this is a big giant freshwater spring coming up into this alkali lake. So it's now flowing into Mono Lake. There's standing on the edge of the lake and the tufa towers in the background. So on this particular trip, we had a wave of three assaults on this area here. The first wave of island invaders rapidly paddled towards a small cinder cone. My neighbor, Dr. Bonzer, had this beautiful blue Old Town canoe. Take it along. So we got that canoe and we got over and made it to the islands, and we came back and we pulled it out of the water. and it ate the paint off the bottom half of the canoe. It was really alkali in that particular case. So this particular one in here, someone had a little tiny 12-foot aluminum boat and a little outboard motor, and we made it over to the islands, but the water was so alkali that it froze up the motor and we couldn't even turn it over. So we had to end up paddling back with our hands, and they would take tennis shoes off and use a tennis shoe as an oar to get back to the shore in that particular case in there. But there was an island we wanted to go to, and it was a man-made island. So we paddled out to it and got around the back side of it, and this is what it looked like. It was half of an island built by Hollywood with plaster on one side and chicken wire, everything like that. There was a movie called Krakatoa East of Java, and you can still get it on Netflix, the movie that was there. So they had a lot of movies taken around in the Mona Lake area. Clint Eastwood had the one in there, the one where they painted the town red and burned it all down. One of these cowboy westerns in that particular case. So I've done a lot of things in Mona Lake. Birds. Nesting ground, and the first trip we went over there, I had no idea about birds. Mike wouldn't go with me. He said, "No, there's no birds over there." So the birds over there type of thing, where we found out that those rubber rafts were really convenient. You could put them over your head and it acted like an umbrella when you got 50,000 gulls going all over everywhere in that area. Then this is the infamous Left 'em on the Island trip of April in '76 in this particular case. So we had an invasion fleet that we left the northern shore and went over to the islands, and I've got dozens and pages of pictures of that. But suffice it to say that the last afternoon we had camped at the bottom. You can see the red tent and the white tent and stuff. And this is Nedget, and we're on Pahoa here. And the wind started coming up, and we had all our boats down, and we had the equipment and stuff in the boats. We woke up the next morning, and it was like the beach at Malibu. There were 12-foot waves coming in, and the wind was blowing 40 miles an hour horizontally, and it was snowing. And so we said, well, we'll take 3 of the boats back, and we'll take the sleeping bags and the coolers, and take the food back. And so we loaded them in there, and there were 3 of us, we just barely made it over to the shore. And we left 38 students. The wind blew so hard you had to use 80-pound rocks instead of 40 ones to hold the rocks down in there. We left 38 students stranded. We were supposed to come home Sunday night. So everybody, all their families and parents and friends and everything were waiting for us to come home, and no one showed. And we couldn't get to a phone in that particular case in there, so we were stuck over there. And so, it ended up ultimately, someone reported it, and there was an article in the Los Angeles Times that professor leaves 38 students stranded during a raging blizzard. But, needless to say, we had a meeting with the district, and we had to alter our field trip notification procedure in that particular case. Wow. But we still make an annual pilgrimage. Okay. We make an annual trip. My tongue. Okay. Get around that one easy. We make an annual trip to Mona Lake every year or so. We go down to the North Shore, and we go to the South Shore and everything like that, and it's just, this is a wonderful, magical place to go. On the south end, there's a South Tufas. The ranger at that time had spent 4 years as the park ranger in Coloma, and so it was neat to have someone that really knew what we were doing down there. The south end of the lake is some of the most recent volcanic activity. When Ponum Crater erupted 640 years ago, it put a layer of ash, gray sandy ash, on the whole south end of Tahoe. It put a 10-foot layer of ash down there. Well, the springs coming up on the south end percolated fresh water up through the sand. And when it percolated it through the sand, calcium carbonate precipitated out and glued all the loose sand particles together, forming these fluted-like towers of cemented stuff. And then on the top of it, the white mineral in there they call phenolite. It's a form of calcium carbonate. But what happened is the wind comes up and blows all the loose sand away and leaves these things standing there. And there's a sand tufas on the South Shore. And it's like a miniature Star Wars scenario as you walk through those particular sand tufas. It's really kind of a neat area. This is one of my favorite places. We have I know the quarry operators, and we have unlimited collecting of pumice and obsidian in the quarries. And I told people that, and this is Pat, she lives in Diamond Springs. That pickup or that vehicle there, those big black shadows in the middle are rocks that took 4 people to lift them and put them inside her van. I don't know how she ever unloaded it, but this is a beautiful place. We then went to, one day we said, let's go to Mount Lassen. And so we drove late in the season, drove up to the south end of Mount Lassen, and it was snow on the ground. We couldn't go through the lake, or couldn't go through Mount Lassen. So someone in the back of the old Yeller said, let's go to the Black Rock Desert. And so we drove around the north side, and we came in across to Susanville. And by that time, it's about 8 o'clock at night. And from Susanville, we took a 90-mile road over to Gerlach. And it was a gravel road, and we went to Gerlach, and Gerlach has a sign, John's Bar and Grill, where the pavement ends and the west begins. So we went to the Black Rock Desert and got in our campsite in the Black Rock Desert about 3 in the morning after driving since 6 o'clock that previous morning. So we got there, and this is along the area where we camped. Along that particular side of Soldiers Meadow was called Hardin City. In Hardin City, when Peter Lassen came across the desert there with his wagon, people would walk along the side of the wagon, and the kids would see an interesting rock, and they'd throw it in a bucket. And then they get over. When they got up above Susanville, they got to looking at the bucket and found some really rich silver ore. So they got really excited and came back the next season and staked claims all over the place. And then someone raised a whole bunch of money back east, and they built a silver mill in a town called Hardin City. There wasn't an ounce of silver anywhere there, and there must have been several $1 million spent. The old foundations are still there by Hardin City. But we were looking for geodes, and we're looking for petrified wood. So we assembled, and we only had about 3 or 4 four-wheel drive vehicles. So we assembled vehicles, and we made an assault over the ridges looking for geodes. And this is people sitting, waiting to load up the four-wheel drive vehicles and go up over the ridge. And you can see that you notice everybody's wearing a seatbelt. And, just we're observing, everybody signed a waiver and a release for the district, and everybody had that taken care of, so that we had all the things covered there. There's, how's that for a piece of petrified wood in that particular case in there? And someone might recognize that. That's our boy Trent sitting on that. He needed a little help getting it in the Jeep. When we got up to Double Hot Springs, there were 2 hot springs there, the north end of the Black Rock Desert. And we got to Double Hot, and you could look in the hot springs. This is our up and over the ridge. I'll come back to the hot springs here in just a minute. But that's the vehicles that we used, and we had snatch-em straps. We'd load a pickup up and with 8 or 10 people in it, and then we'd put a Jeep in front of it with a snatch-em strap, and we'd pull it up the top of the ridge, and then we had another 3 miles to go. So we'd get that from camp. But we came up this ridge, and all of those round things there are geodes. Knee deep in geodes for 100 yards in this particular case. And so the geodes weathering out and concentrating the bottom of the small draw. So you can see here, which of these 300 ones am I going to put in my pack? And how many can I carry back to the vehicles? Half a mile down the draw in that particular case. So you really, decisions. You see people there, and they've got 4 piles. Ones I got to take, ones I'd really like to take, and ones I'm going to leave, type of thing. And they tried to get them all at that particular case. But just wonderful geodes. The second trip was up there when they had the bicentennial, and they had hands across the country. And so we wanted to do a hands across the desert. So we went to the Black Rock Desert. We even had bumper stickers made, 86 Black Rock Enduro in that particular case in there. Well, 125 people showed up for that trip, and we had fed everybody in a central kitchen for 4 days in that particular case, breakfast, dinner. This is the start of the Black Rock Enduro at Gerlach, as the sign said, where the pavement ends and the west begins. And there's the Enduro. You leave Gerlach and you don't turn right or left. You drive straight for 60 miles in that particular case. And, you know, it gets kind of carried away. People think, oh boy, this is kind of neat. So you have that many vehicles, it looks like Rommel's Africa Corps, a big V spread out for about 6 miles with dust going up to 8,000 feet as we went across in that particular area. Yeah. Rusty Hauge had this beautiful little black pickup. We were really first class this time. The metal frame in there was for our outdoor John. We had a metal frame and a seat that folded down, and we had a canvas that went all around it like that, and a little metal attachment for the toilet paper and that type of thing. Well, he also had some very expensive radio-controlled airplanes, and he was going along and he hit a bump and everything went out of the back of the truck and he went away. So we had lots of pieces of things on the desert. Occasionally people would break down. I talked to a fellow at the bar in Gerlach one time, and his pickup was parked out in back, and I went out and looked at the pickup, and he had every possible part that could break down in the bed of that truck. Carburetors, differentials, tires, everything like that. He worked up in Soldier Meadows. He said, if you break down up here, it's going to take you 6 weeks to walk out. So it's really in the boonies. There's the hot springs. And the hot springs is so scaldingly hot that cattle would fall in there and it would kill them instantly, and then it would boil all the meat off. You could see complete skeletons of cows in the bottom of the hot springs. And then where the water ran out over here was about 18 inches wide that ran out, and it was cooler a little further out down like that. Rattlesnakes would come up and try to cross that hot water, and they get, the front of the snake would be here, it would kill it, and then the end of the snake would be there, and the middle would be just the ribs from the hot water boiling it off, that particular case in there. So those were really hot water things. So this is unloading the troops on the way to the petrified wood. And this is then hiking up, we had along this trail, and we had to get up to these draws and drains to get the petrified wood. And you know, the comment about, I think it's up this draw, and you kind of prospect and pick up pieces of it. And then we ran across several areas there where everything you touched was petrified wood, logs and pieces and chunks. There's a 10-foot long petrified log, and the limbs and stuff had been replaced with agate and chert and stuff, and it was just beautiful pieces like that. So there was just, you know, there, you know, look at the pieces there. Pick that up and put it in your pack and carry it back out to the campsite. Yeah, she sat on that for 2 hours and wouldn't let anybody touch it because it was hers. And then 5 guys tried to pick it up, and it was so heavy 5 guys couldn't pick it up, and so it was left there. I'm sure it's gone by now. But you know, it really kind of helps when the editor and principal staff writer of the Mountain Democrat are on your trip. Ursula Smith and Virginia Briggs attended a lot of our trips and just, you know, did some really neat things, gave us some great coverage. There's the crystal spring. You can see down 40 feet in that water, just seeping hot in that area there. We had several sojourns to the Stuart Valley, which is, if you know where Berlin Ichthyosaur Park is in central Nevada, this side of Berlin is the Stuart Valley, and it's between there and what they call Gabs. And this is really out in the boonies. I met a guy, Howard Shorn, at UC Hayward, and he was a paleontologist, and I met him at a conference, and he said, if you want to find some really neat fossils, you got to go to the Stuart Valley. And he had 3-4 pieces of paper shale, he called it, and there were insects preserved in this paper shale. 10 million years ago, they had a volcanic ash find come into that area and trap these insects in full flight going across the lakes, and they would preserve them in the ash. They were so finely preserved you could actually key out the insect by the venation in the wings. You had beetles in full flight like this. Just an absolutely super place. So we went out to the Stuart Valley and had some wonderful trips. One of our trips, the district had a PR Winnebago that they went around to the campuses and said, you know, this is what we're doing on this stuff. And so I said, gee, you know, could we borrow that Winnebago for a trip? And they said, sure, no problem at all. Just don't take it off the paved road. So we loaded that sucker up with food for 75 people, and we took it out in the desert. And this shows barbecuing chicken. We barbecued chicken one night. We'd have T-bone steaks the next night. We ate first cabin, just absolutely. We had plenty of spaghetti sauce, these kinds of things. So We hauled all the food and the kitchen gear for 75 people on this trip out there, and then I would set up a lecture before we go out in the field in the day, and I made a big flip chart, series of big flip charts, and we'd sit down and I'd talk to people about what was the geology around the area, where's the best place to go in this particular horizon to collect fish, where's the best place to go to collect insects, where's the best place to go to collect vertebrates, and we have invertebrate snails that were replaced with agate. Just a cornucopia of things in there. But this is the lecture, and these are the flip charts that I made. And so I'd have one flip chart on the geology of the area going in there. I have another flip chart on how the insects were preserved in the lakes. Another one here on point bar deposits of the rivers running into this lake, how it would bury vertebrates. And we actually found a rhino here. In just a minute, I'll show it to you here. And then I put these charts up showing fluvial is water, lacustrine is lake, showing the different deposits and the different formations and the thickness of each. Then people would have an idea when we go out to collect where to go look. Did not just blindly go out and start digging. So we did some wonderful things in that area. Rusty discovered the head and shoulders of a rhino at the base of this cliff. And there's a group digging it out and stuff like that. Just a wonderful find in that thing. And we found fish and stuff. There's a group picture of that particular trip out there. And you see that this was a popular place. And we had a lot of people going along on these particular trips. One of the things that we tried to do was that at supper time, to liven it up a little bit, we'd have a table setting contest. And a table setting contest had to be things you found on the trip, not that you brought with you, things you found on the trip. Well, right next to Stuart Valley on the top of the ridge was an old mining camp. And so we'd go up there and we'd find old pottery and old dishes that were half broken and things like that. And people would collect during the day and come back, and then they'd set a table up at night around the table. And we'd have a judging and go around and judge the first, second, and third place in that particular area there. And at that particular time, our Mountain Democrat guardians were then, so they were the judges. So they'd take it out of our hands. But we set a kitchen up. And we would feed 125 people breakfast, lunch, and dinner out in the desert. And the food was absolutely, for $20 a head. $20 a head we'd do that. And the food was absolutely super. And we'd never assign anybody a duty. We'd have 8 people lined up saying, what can I do? And they'd all pitch in to do everything. So, you know, just reminding people, oh yeah, the Stakeside truck, we got back and we'd stop at a car wash and clean it off before we'd bring it back to the district. But there's the wind coming up late in the afternoon, and this trip in there, we brought our own porta potties along. So at that particular case, so we didn't have to, you know, dig latrines in the desert floor. I got these porta potties by going to Wilkinson and saying, hey, Ned Carnett donated one free to me. And then I took and went to Ned and said, hey, Wilkinson donated one free to me. So I got them both free, and we took them out in the desert. So my wife tells me that I should have been a car salesman or something in that particular case there. The fossil fish, in this particular case, I've not keyed them out to the species, but I call them these beautiful brown rock cod because they're brown and we found them in rock and this type of thing. But they're about 10 million years old, perfectly preserved, just beautiful, just as good as the Green River, Wyoming fish that are preserved in that particular area. So there's one of the winning tabletops with rusty old cups and wood from the old buildings and stuff like that. So people had a lot of fun. We just, you know, we made it not only interesting scientifically, but we made it really interesting as far as what we were doing and that type of thing. There's group photos as we loaded up to come home. Everybody wanted to get a picture next to the John. I don't know what it is. In the spring of '93, my old friend Mark Smith called me up. I went to the Rubicon with Mark in 1964, he and Howard Bliss, up there to their campsite. They wanted me to talk about the geology, and I wrote up a story that's included, I think, in the Jeepers Guide even today, about the geology of that particular part of the country. But so I've been into the Rubicon for many, many times, but Mark called me up and he said, I just formed this Jeep Jamboree USA, and he wanted me to be a resource guide on JJUSA trips and tell people about the geology of the areas we're going to. They were generally 3 to 5 days in length, involving 75 to 150 Jeeps. They would supply me with a Jeep, pay me a salary and all expenses. Took me about 10 seconds to accept the offer at that particular case there. I joined this, what we call the nomadic Jeep sojourns through the West. We went to ghost towns of Fallon, Nevada and Bodie. We took separate trips to Canyonlands, Arch Canyon, Moab, Utah. We journeyed to Ouray and Silverton, Colorado. We went to the Black Hills of South Dakota and the Lost Coast area of northwestern Humboldt County. He also wanted me to come to Rubicon Springs for Jamberies in the summer, and I couldn't get away all the time, so he said, well, that's okay, we'll take care of it. And so I drive to Loon Lake and they'd give me a helicopter ride in, so I didn't have to drive in that particular time in there. You know, I didn't tell him that I probably would have done all of this without being paid a dime, but I figured, you know, I didn't want to screw it up, so I just kept going. There's Mark and I sitting at the camp in Rubicon Springs, and then this is, if you ever lecture at 13,000 feet, you can't be very long-winded because you run out of wind at that elevation in that particular case. But this is up on Imogene Pass, right going down into Telluride, and the mining and history up in that part of the world is just absolutely fantastic. We would drive up into Natural Arches, Canyonland, and these areas around there, and to stop next to these edifices and talk about how they formed and what's there and what you can recognize is just magic. And here's up on Engineer Pass at 12,000 feet, south of Ouray, an old mining camp up in there. And those people really had it tough in the winter. You know, they had 25, 35 feet of snow and avalanches and all kinds of stuff. They were really tough. We would take Jeeps and go up, and this is in a Cherokee out of Moab. And there's another one pointing out Anasazi cliff dwellings and the arches in that particular region. There's Brian went along to talk about the Native Americans and the Anasazis, and this is called Hotel Rock, aptly, out of Blanding. And then we would go up, and these pictographs and petroglyphs are just absolutely amazing in that part of the world. There is a four-wheeling in the Wrangler and Moab, and there is Plain in the Rocks. Here's Grand Cherokees, and we had people come on trips that would take their young kids and put them in a baby seat in the back seat as they're going up over the rocks and stuff like that in these Grand Cherokees. Absolutely amazing to see where you can go with those kind of vehicles. One of the people that was my idol when I first started was an itinerant geologist by the name of Charlie Steen. Charlie got a degree in geology from the University of Texas and ran around in the end of the Second World War. We were looking for uranium, and he was one of the many people doing uranium strikes in that part of the country. And Charlie discovered the first primary uranium deposit, and he was eating beans and living in a house that didn't even have running water, had 3 young kids. He sold 20 claims near the Mavita claim near Moab for $168 million. So he went from eating beans one day to that. You know, he rented a Matson liner and took 400 of his friends on a 6-month cruise around the world, that type of thing. He built a house between Reno and Washoe in that area there. It cost him about $13 million. His kids drove to the high school in Reno in Maseratis and Ferraris and these kinds of things. And Charlie believed in living it up. First thing he did was he bought an airplane so he could fly his dirty laundry up to Salt Lake City so he could get it washed up in there so his wife didn't have to worry about it. But ultimately Charlie ended up dying, and not dying, but becoming broke, lost everything. I don't know why. But out in Moab, there's a restaurant in the middle of town sitting up on this bluff, and that was Charlie's home, and it's been converted into a restaurant. In the back of that is then was Charlie's Jeep that he used on his original claim, so I took a picture of that. Then this, I won't hold you too much longer. This is a potpourri of various field trips over the years. Underground in the Mother Lode, the Lincoln Mine. Here is the Harvard Mine in Jamestown. That 44-pound gold nugget that's down at Murphy's Winery, at Krause Ironstone Winery, came from that open pit right there by Sonora. They were mining, a good friend of mine was running the job there on a Sunday, Christmas Day, and they were mining a limited crew, and all of a sudden the conveyor belt up to the secondary crusher, he looked and the alarm went off and it stopped, and he came in, and here's a 3-foot wide conveyor belt, 150 feet long, of solid gold. And the piece that's in out of Murphy's is now 18 inches wide because it went through the primary crusher and crushed it down to 18. It's the size of a garbage can lid. You can get out of the winery and see it down there. It's just amazing in that particular area. There's more underground. Here's Mona Lake. The center of the South Coulee is the intrusive plug, elevation 9,000 feet. Here's a 10 stamp mill north of Groveland. I organized 3 or 4 trips down to Hetch Hetchy on the San Francisco PUC. We went from San Francisco to Hetch Hetchy and went through that particular trip area there. Oh yeah, there's our talc wagon, I call it, in that particular case. This is Billy the Kid mine at the Plum Mine, and this is down in Silver City, and we're going to go to that. And this year, and when we go to Virginia City, there's the classic Roche Moutonnet on Tioga Pass. We just got by from that. It's still operating in Marysville, and I want to try to get a trip there next semester. The operating gold dredge. That dredge drills 165 feet beneath the surface of the water. And they're mining gold, and they're smiling, although the gold price is down a little bit, so I think they take weekends off now. There's the Argonaut Mill tailings out of Jackson. The group standing near there. There's another 3,000 feet down in a tunnel. 2007, I had a really unusual honor. The California Federation of Mineralogical Societies named me as the outstanding geology educator in California and gave a scholarship of $6,000 in my name. In 2008, the National Federation of American Mineralogists named me the Distinguished Achievement and gave me $8,000 worth of scholarships. So we have now 3 students at UNR and Sac State that are benefiting from that kind of money. So I thought that was really neat. Then the local Gem and Mineral Club honored me. They asked Mary Jane and I to go out for dinner one night downtown. And didn't think anything about it. We went to dinner, and they said, well, come on and look at our new office up here in the right next to the courtyard. And so we walked up the stairs, and here's a whole room full of people and a big sign on the wall called the Wheeldon Center. And this is where they have their meetings and this type of thing. I got this letter, thought it was kind of interesting, in July last summer, and this is from the State Board of Registration of Geologists, and they sent me a letter appreciating the work that I'd done in geology. And then in August, I got one from the Engineers, Land Surveyors, and Geology Board, in that particular case, commemorating me for over 50 years of professional service to the citizens of the state of California. So I thought that doesn't happen too often with state registration boards, that they come along and say, hey, you know, you're doing a neat job. And you know, depending upon your politics, I did spend 12 years on the EID board, and some, you know, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, this Republican that stands here, John Doolittle, did an awful lot for the citizens of our particular community. He got probably $165 million of funds to be spent in El Dorado County on our water systems. And part of that was the transfer of, EID now owns Sly Park Reservoir and all the water in it. It used to be that the Bureau owned it. We bought it from them for $1, and it went through Congress. So this is for the citizens of the county. The sound, can you hear it at all?
Okay.
So I went on my 30th birthday.
Right.
And afterwards had dinner. And
You told me to going on my 80th.
On your 80th birthday, right on. Happy birthday.
This is my grandson that went with me.
experience at one time.
Right. So you're going to check it off the list.
This is on the list.
How you feeling? How you feeling right now?
Excited.
Yeah.
I'm really
How about nervous? Are you nervous a little bit? No, not yet? Okay, wait till the door opens it up.
You remember last time, it all kicks in as soon as you jump out that plane.
Yep,
That's when it
that's right.
This will be an exciting time.
Oh yeah, I guarantee.
Okay.
All right, I'll meet you guys at the plane.
Okay.
That's an altimeter.
Right, so about halfway. That's right. Still want to do this, right? I have to check. Yeah, okay. Yeah, he's been doing it. How about you? All right, I'll meet you outside. Have fun.
Come on with me. Come on with me. I wanted to go back. That was 7,000 feet of free fall. That was a photographer. There, that's me.
Yeah, good job, George. George, you're a skydiver. Nice job. Rush, isn't it?
As you see, I was a little woozy.
Oh, thank you, sir. He does nice work, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Congratulations, George. Good job. Do not try this at home, folks.
No, I'd just like to kind of finish it in here is that all these wonderful journeys would not have been possible without the support of my lovely wife sitting in the back of the room in there. She is still as beautiful today as she was when I took these pictures on our honeymoon in the British Virgin Islands 35 years ago. So, and I hope we can have 35 more. Wait, there's a higher mountain on the other side of the valley. I think we can get there before dark. Okay?
Good job, man.
Thank you. Someone get the lights in the back.
Somebody could flip on one bank. One bank's enough. Oh my God. So I don't know if George recruited anybody on field trips after showing those pictures, but I guarantee you one thing: the skydive looked a lot safer than the Black Rock Desert.
Yeah.
Especially with the yellow van.
Well, the picture where we had the picture on the concrete slab, It didn't show you that there were 6 boards that the students were sitting on that covered up another 1,000-foot deep shaft that they were bouncing on like a yo-yo.
Yeah, and I should tell you, George has always been the geology guy, I've been the biology guy in field studies. And we've made it through 40 years of field studies. I should knock on wood for you, not for me. Without a single lawsuit. Nobody got injured.
They know.
Don't tell them about
They
the injury.
know if they do sue, that one of those empty holes in the Nevada desert is going to be filled up with them. Thank you, all my friends and colleagues and fellow rock lickers in this particular case. Come join me on my sauntering trips. The clipboard is around. Give me your address and your email, and please, I'm still doing these kinds of things, and keep in touch.
And I'm going to close by telling you a story about George that'll take just 30 seconds. But he introduced himself to the local fire department and police department of El Dorado County at an early age when he first started teaching. You remember the element sodium that you studied in chemistry, and you do remember how stable it is, how unstable it is. 1 electron in the outer shell, and it explodes easily when you mix it with water.
Let me tell it.
Okay.
Real quick.
This is the first story I heard about him when I came to this county.
Well, when I taught chemistry, I wanted to make sure that everything was really spectacular and did a lot of demonstrations. And so we had, that was when we were at UBR, and there was a big pond at the fairgrounds there. And so when I ordered chemicals one year, I got sodium comes in a metal can, and you can get it in 1/4 pound blocks and 1 pound blocks. And so I got a can of sodium, and we opened up the 1 pound block, and I picked the strongest basketball player in class, and I said, take this and throw it as far as you can in the middle of the lake. And it went in the middle of the lake, and it dropped down there, and it exploded like a depth charge. And it went up in the air and was spiraling around, spraying white, burning sodium, landed on the edge of the pond, and lay there sputtering. And I had the fire chief, Farley, was in class, and I said, call your dad and have him come out with his pickup, and we'll take that hose and we'll wet it down. Well, in about 38 seconds, here comes a big hook and ladder truck with the sirens going on. And the chief jumps out, and he's got this big nozzle and a big hose, and I said, don't walk up. I know what I'm doing. He hit that thing with a hose, and it blew up into 500 pieces, and they went all directions like white phosphorus. People were diving under cars, beating it off their sweaters, and at this time class was out, and students were coming out of class and looking, and this is in the right by the parking lot at Rayleigh's, and we drew a huge crowd.
Yes, you did.
Like that. And
The newspaper made a point of that.
oh yeah. Another article, Professor kills frogs in pond. But I made an impression on people. Thank you, Mike, for all your help.
Thank you, sir.
Good. Good.